While the ocean provides humans with vast resources, its marine life has not been cared for as it should be. Overfishing, intensive research, and pollution have taken a toll on the seas. Though the water cannot retaliate, its inhabitants sometimes do. Join us as we recount a chilling incident where a great white shark attacked researchers in a striking act of vengeance. On the morning of September 27, 2024, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter navigated Maine's rough waters. The crew, seasoned in patrolling these treacherous seas, embarked on a routine mission to check fishing grounds and enforce maritime law. Yet the brooding sky and eerily calm sea hinted at an unforeseen danger that no training could have prepared them for. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a strange disturbance about a mile ahead. The ship's radar picked up something massive moving erratically beneath the surface, but the nature of the anomaly was unclear. The helmsman reduced the speed of the vessel, giving the crew a moment to assess. At first, they suspected it was an ordinary marine animal, perhaps a whale migration southward. But as they approached the area, the situation turned far more dire. A massive great white shark breached the surface with shocking force, launching its enormous body out of the water. It was no ordinary breach. This shark exhibited an aggression unseen in typical excellent white behavior. The force with which it broke the surface sent waves crashing against the vessel's hull, causing the ship to rock violently. The crew watched in disbelief as the shark, efficiently 20 feet in length, twisted in mid-air before crashing back into the water. Seconds later, it was gone, disappearing into the dark depths. For a moment, there was only the howling wind and the eerie silence of the sea. Then, without warning, the shark struck the ship's hull from below. The impact was jarring, as though the vessel had collided with a submerged object, causing the entire ship to shudder. The crew scrambled to assess the damage, but the absolute nightmare had just begun. The shark breached again, this time coming down directly onto the starboard side, striking with enough force to leave a dent in the steel. Water sloshed over the deck, and the ship tilted momentarily as the impact knocked the vessel off balance. The icy Atlantic surged over the sides, soaking the crew as they scrambled for stability. Another hit came, this time from below, with the shark ramming the underside of the ship like a battering ram. Panic rippled through the crew. This was no ordinary attack. The captain issued the order for everyone to secure themselves and prepare for emergency procedures. But before anyone could respond, the shark struck again, the most powerful hit yet. The ship groaned as the hull buckled under the relentless assault. Alarms blared, signaling a breach, and water began to pour into the lower decks. The vessel was sinking. Chaos erupted as the crew initiated an emergency evacuation. Life rafts were deployed and sailors hurriedly donned their survival suits. The cold, biting wind and the swirling, chaotic sea made coordination nearly impossible. The shark circled menacingly, its dorsal fin slicing through the water like a knife. Every few minutes it would disappear into the depths, only to reappear with another violent strike against the vessel. The ship was sinking faster than anyone could have anticipated. The freezing water surged into the engine room, shorting out the power systems and plunging parts of the ship into darkness. The once stable vessel now leaned precariously to one side as the stern dipped below the waterline. The crew, fighting against time in the freezing water, rushed to secure lifeboats and deploy emergency beacons, hoping that help would arrive before it was too late. Survival instincts took over as the water rose higher on the ship. Crew members, soaked and freezing, struggled to keep their footing on the slick deck. The boat tilted further, and with a sickening lurch, the vessel capsized. Some of the crew were thrown overboard by the force of the capsizing, while others were left clinging to the sinking ship's hull. In the water, the fight for survival began. The temperature was just above freezing, a brutal reality for those thrown into the icy Atlantic. Life jackets barely insulated them from the cold, and hypothermia was a deadly threat. The shark, however, remained the most immediate danger. It had not vanished with the sinking ship. Instead, it circled the wreckage, bumping against floating debris and occasionally lunging at anyone it detected in the water. The crew members swam frantically towards the life rafts, but the shark moved with terrifying speed, darting beneath the surface and breaching unpredictably. A few men, unlucky enough to be caught in its path, were dragged under in a blur of white water and blood. Each attack was swift and savage, the result of a predator driven to an unnatural aggression. The surviving crew members struggled to climb into the life rafts, their movements sluggish from the cold. The shark seemed relentless, circling beneath them, testing the rafts with bumps and nudges. It breached once more, sending a shower of water across the life rafts, and then sank beneath the surface again, disappearing into the blackness of the sea. For now, it seemed to have retreated, leaving the survivors trembling and soaked in icy terror. Hours passed before rescue finally arrived. Helicopters spotted the emergency beacons and arrived just as daylight began to fade. The survivors, shivering and on the verge of collapse from exposure, were lifted from the life rafts one by one. But for several of their comrades, the Great White had claimed them, disappearing into the deep with no trace left behind. In the aftermath, the sinking of the Asterisk vessel Asterisk led to a national investigation. Marine biologists and environmental scientists scrambled to understand what had triggered such extraordinary aggression in the significant white shark population. Initial theories pointed to marine ecosystem disruptions, perhaps caused by shifting climate conditions, overfishing, or pollution that had disturbed the shark's natural hunting patterns. Warming ocean temperatures were also suspected, driving the predators to more northern waters in search of food. The survivors of the Asterisk vessel Asterisk would carry the scars, both physical and mental, of that day for the rest of their lives. They had faced not just the unforgiving elements of the Atlantic, but a predator that had defied expectations, driven by forces far beyond anyone's control. The waters off the coast of Maine would never be viewed the same way again, as the legacy of that brutal encounter became part of the lore of the sea, a cautionary tale of the dangerous balance between humanity and the natural world. Under the Caribbean sun, 6 seasoned divers, led by marine biologist Dr. Elise Novak, descended into the crystal-clear waters to study the reef's health and the effects of nearby human activity. The coral teemed with vibrant marine life. Parrotfish, angelfish, and surgeonfish darted among the coral, while the divers' cameras captured the ecosystem's beauty. However, Dr. Novak sensed something was wrong. Visibility dropped suddenly as debris clouded the water. Unusual for this calm area, it put the team on alert. Then a white-tip reef shark appeared, swimming closer than usual, its predatory gaze unsettling. More sharks joined, circling the divers with increasing intensity. The typically shy sharks exhibited unusual behavior, moving erratically. Tension filled the water as one shark nipped at a diver's equipment and another bumped a tank. The divers formed a tighter group, their training kicking in. But the sharks were growing bolder and more aggressive. Dr. Novak signaled to retreat, but the situation escalated quickly, forcing the team to make a hasty and tense escape. Without warning, a strong current surged through the water, pushing the divers off course and deeper into the reef. The white-tip sharks, seemingly in tune with the chaos, used the current to their advantage. They swam in erratic patterns, forcing the divers into narrow channels within the reef. The jagged coral formations loomed closer as the divers tried to maneuver through the dangerous twists and turns, all while the sharks pressed closer, their bodies brushing against the divers with increasing aggression. The realization hit them all at once. They were being corralled. The sharks were driving them into more dangerous territory, where escape would be difficult. Panic bubbled beneath the surface, but they couldn't afford to lose control. Dr. Novak's mind raced. What could be causing the sharks to act this way? She had never seen white tips this agitated. Then it struck her. The construction site. Just 2 miles away, a massive underwater project was underway, designed to lay the foundation for an oceanic research facility. It had disrupted the natural flow of the ocean, stirring up sediment and likely displacing the sharks' prey. Their natural hunting grounds were being destroyed, and in their confusion and desperation, they were turning on anything that moved. The divers were now trapped in a narrow corridor between towering coral walls. The sharks, relentless, swam faster, darting in and out, testing the divers' boundaries. One particularly large white tip slammed into a diver's tank, knocking them into the coral. The jagged edges tore through the wetsuit, leaving a thin trail of blood in the water. The scent of it seemed to ignite something primal in the sharks. They moved faster, more erratic, driven by a mix of confusion, fear, and hunger. The team was in trouble. The current had pushed them into a tight space where the coral formations created a maze-like environment. Every time they tried to move forward, the sharks herded them back, blocking their escape routes. The confined space made it impossible to stay clear of the coral, and more scrapes and cuts appeared on the divers as they collided with the sharp edges. The blood in the water grew thicker, and with it, the sharks' aggression mounted. A diver at the back of the group was struck by one of the sharks, the force knocking off a mask. As they fumbled to replace it, another shark moved in, jaws open, snapping at the exposed limb. The diver managed to pull away just in time, but the danger was closing in. The current had funneled them into a deeper trench, the water cooler and darker. It was a dead end. The sharks, however, had no intention of letting them retreat. Their circling became tighter and more focused. The divers were exhausted, their movements slowing as they tried to fend off the increasingly bold attacks. The sharks were no longer just testing, they were striking. In the chaos, Dr. Novak knew they had one option left: use the equipment. She signaled to her team, and they quickly activated the sonic devices strapped to their wrists. These tools, designed to repel sharks by emitting high-frequency sound waves, were their last hope. As the sound pulsed through the water, the sharks hesitated, their circling faltering. But they didn't flee. Instead, they backed off slightly, their instincts confused by the new sensation. It bought the team precious moments, but not enough to escape entirely. The current shifted again, slightly weaker this time, but it was just enough. Dr. Novak led the team in a desperate dash along the trench, their lungs burning from the exertion. The sharks followed, still aggressive but momentarily disoriented by the sonic waves. It was a race against time. They had to get out before the sharks regained their focus. Finally, the reef opened up. The divers broke free into the wider ocean where the current was less severe. They swam upward, pushing their bodies to the limit as the boat came into view. The sharks, still lingering at the edge of the trench, made a few final passes but eventually retreated into the deeper waters. As the divers surfaced, gasping for air, the weight of what had happened settled over them. The construction and the disturbance in the shark's habitat are all connected. The delicate balance of the reef had been disrupted, and the consequences had been dire. Their expedition had gone from research to survival in the blink of an eye, a stark reminder of how fragile the underwater world indeed was. Back aboard the boat, Dr. Novak stared out over the now calm sea. Human interference had thrown the reef, once a haven for marine life, into chaos. She knew the data they had collected would be critical in proving the impact of the construction, but it came at a cost, one they would never forget. The remote marine research facility in Northern California was a quiet, isolated hub of scientific activity. Tucked away on a rugged stretch of coast, the facility specialized in studying the behavior of leopard sharks, a species known for its distinctive spots and generally calm demeanor. The team of researchers had been working for months, gathering data on the sharks' feeding habits, migratory patterns, and the effects of changing water temperatures on their behavior. It was a routine, albeit fascinating project that had drawn some of the brightest marine biologists to this secluded location. Dr. Linnea Faulkner, the lead researcher, was deep into her observations when something unusual caught her eye. A huge leopard shark, much more significant than any they had previously documented, had become increasingly agitated in the tank. The shark had always been an outlier in their data. While the other sharks exhibited predictable, calm behavior, the shark had shown signs of heightened aggression in recent weeks. Its movements were erratic, and it often slammed its body against the tank's reinforced glass, something none of the other sharks had done before. The other researchers, including Dr. Faulkner's colleagues, Dr. Errol Hargrave and Dr. Sienna Cortez, had grown concerned. They had noted small but troubling changes in the water. Pollutant levels, though within legal limits, had been rising incrementally in the area's waters. Hargrave had been the first to suggest that the sharks were reacting to something in their environment, but no one could pinpoint exactly what. As the team continued to monitor the shark, its behavior became even more frenzied. Its muscular body churned through the water, sending waves crashing against the tank walls. The reinforced glass strained under the force of the animal's repeated attacks, creating deep, visible cracks. Dr. Cortez called out to the rest of the team, her alarm palpable. The shark had never been this aggressive before. Without warning, the inevitable happened. The massive shark breached the tank with an explosion of water and glass. The sheer force of its escape sent shards flying across the lab, and in an instant the shark was thrashing on the floor, its slick body glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. For a brief moment, there was a stunned silence as the team processed what had just occurred. Then chaos erupted. The shark, driven by a combination of aggression and survival instinct, managed to make its way out of the lab and into the facility's surrounding waters. The marine lab built on the coast had direct access to the open ocean, with only a series of underwater barriers separating the facility's research area from the greater Pacific. These barriers were designed to keep the sharks inside and to allow the researchers to conduct their studies in a controlled environment. But with the shark now loose in the waters just outside the lab, the team realized they had a dangerous situation on their hands. The shark, now free, disappeared into the deeper waters surrounding the facility, but it wasn't long before its presence was felt again. The first attack happened swiftly. One of the junior researchers, Nathaniel Klein, was conducting routine maintenance on the underwater observation equipment when the shark struck. The shark appeared from the depths, a streak of muscle and power, and rammed directly into the equipment, knocking Klein into the water. He flailed, trying to find his bearings, but the shark was faster. Its jaws snapped at him, grazing his leg. Blood clouded the water, and in a desperate scramble, Klein was pulled to safety by his colleagues, his leg mangled but intact. Panic spread through the facility. The researchers realized that the shark was not behaving like a typical leopard shark. It was hunting them. The equipment they used to track the shark's movements was suddenly a liability. The shark, sensitive to the electromagnetic fields produced by the technology, saw the equipment as a threat, and anything near it became a target. Several other pieces of high-value observation technology were damaged, and vital data was lost in an instant. The team had to act fast. They couldn't afford to lose more equipment, and with the shark now actively attacking anyone who ventured into the water, they knew they had to capture the shark before more severe injuries, or worse, occurred. Dr. Faulkner, Hargrave, and Cortez gathered in the lab to devise a plan. Tranquilizing the shark would be nearly impossible. The shark had become too aggressive, and any attempt to get close enough to administer a sedative would put their lives at risk. Traditional capture methods, nets or cages, might only provoke the shark further, leading to more destruction. Instead, they decided to lure the shark into a confined area where they could study its behavior and neutralize the threat. Using the remaining intact underwater observation drones, they directed the shark toward one of the facility's enclosed research bays, a reinforced sections of the water where specimens could be isolated for closer study. It was a risky plan. The bay wasn't designed to hold a shark of the shark's size and strength, and if it broke through, it would be loose in the open ocean, where it could pose a threat to nearby coastal communities. With the bait set, the team monitored the shark's movements. The shark circled the facility's perimeter, agitated and unpredictable, but eventually it followed the drone into the bay. Once inside, the researchers sealed the area with a reinforced gate, but the shark didn't calm down. The shark's body slammed against the walls of the bay with relentless force, each impact a reminder of its raw power. Cracks began to form, just as they had in the original tank. The researchers knew they didn't have long. As they scrambled to reinforce the gates, Dr. Cortez made a chilling discovery. The water samples taken from the bay showed alarmingly high levels of industrial pollutants, chemicals that had been slowly seeping into the water from a nearby offshore drilling site. It all started to make sense. The pollutants were causing neurological damage to the sharks, affecting their behavior and making them more aggressive. The shark wasn't an anomaly. It was the first clear sign of a much larger environmental crisis. The other sharks in the facility had been exhibiting subtle changes, but the shark had reacted the most violently, perhaps because of its size or some other genetic factor. Whatever the case, the pollution had driven it to become a danger not just to the researchers, but potentially to anyone in the surrounding waters. As the team worked tirelessly to stabilize the bay and contain the shark, they realized that their research had taken a darker turn. What had started as a study of leopard shark behavior had now become a race to understand the broader impact of human activity on marine ecosystems. At a remote marine research facility on the Northern California coastline, a group of dedicated marine biologists was hard at work. The facility was home to an array of state-of-the-art tanks and research labs, where the team focused on understanding the behavior and biology of various marine species. Their primary subject of study at the moment was the leopard shark, a species they had been monitoring for months in order to uncover the effects of pollution and climate change on the region's aquatic life. The team included researchers Malia Hawkins, Tai Quan, Zara Chen, and Jalen Roberts. Their research was critical, and the stakes were high. Northern California's waters, once pristine, were becoming increasingly unpredictable. Pollution levels were rising, and the environmental degradation they documented had begun showing in the behavior of the local shark population. Malia was observing a giant leopard shark that had caught their attention weeks earlier. More significant than most in the facility, the creature exhibited erratic behavior that none of the researchers could explain. It often thrashed violently in its tank, knocking against the walls with a ferocity not typical for the species. The team had theorized that it might be reacting to a combination of stressors: pollution, increased water temperatures, or some other unseen factor in its environment. The facility had a series of interconnected tanks, with a central one explicitly designed for the more aggressive individuals. It was in this tank that the leopard shark had become something of an anomaly. Tai, who was responsible for analyzing the data on its movements and health metrics, noted strange spikes in its heart rate and patterns in its behavior that did not match those of any other sharks in their care. Something was pushing this shark beyond its natural limits, but they hadn't yet identified the cause. One particularly foggy afternoon, the tension in the air was palpable. Malia stood by the viewing platform, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the massive leopard shark glide through the water. The creature's usual unsettling calm was gone, replaced by sudden bursts of energy. Zara, across the room, was preparing another round of chemical testing on the water, hoping to identify toxins or pollutants that could be contributing to the shark's behavior. Jalen, the technician responsible for the mechanical aspects of the facility, was running routine checks on the tank systems when the first sign of trouble hit. Without warning, the leopard shark rammed the side of the tank with such force that a wave of water crashed over the edge. The entire structure groaned under the impact. The team rushed to the control panels as alarms blared, signaling a breach. They had seen the shark thrash before, but this was different. This was pure aggression fueled by something they had failed to understand. Jalen quickly sealed off the adjoining tanks, preventing the water from overflowing into other sections of the facility. But it was too late. In one final surge, the leopard shark propelled itself out of the tank, breaching the flimsy containment systems. It landed with a sickening thud on the floor, its body thrashing violently as it fought to find its way to water. Malia screamed internally, her hands flying over the control panel to initiate the emergency procedures. The shark, however, had already slipped out of their grasp, disappearing into the channels that led to the open waters just outside the facility. Panic gripped the team. The aggressive nature of the shark, combined with its size and strength, posed an immediate threat not only to the researchers, but to the fragile equipment they relied on for their work. Worse, the surrounding waters were not equipped to handle such a large predator on the loose. It would endanger not just the team, but the local marine wildlife they had worked so hard to protect. In the control room, Malia and Tai tracked the shark's movements via sonar, watching as it made its way into the nearby cove. Zara and Jalen scrambled to gather equipment for a makeshift containment strategy. They couldn't let the shark remain free. Its aggression could lead to disastrous consequences if it got any closer to the other research tanks or ventured into the bay, where it might encounter local swimmers or fishermen. The clock was ticking, and with every second that passed, the shark grew more unpredictable. As Malia monitored its movements, she noticed an alarming pattern. It wasn't just swimming aimlessly. The shark was heading straight for the facility's intake pipes, which connected to the underwater systems that regulated the tanks. If it damaged those, the entire facility would be compromised. Zara and Jalen, armed with improvised nets and tranquilizers, raced down to the docks. They knew their chances of capturing the shark without causing harm were slim, but they had no choice. Time was running out, and the safety of the facility and their lives depended on containing the creature before it could do any more damage. As they launched a small boat into the waters, the fog thickened, reducing visibility to almost nothing. The waves slapped against the hull as Zara leaned over the edge, trying to spot the massive shape of the shark beneath the surface. Jalen steered, his eyes darting between the sonar screen and the water ahead, waiting for any sign of movement. The cold, oppressive atmosphere added to the growing sense of dread that something far worse was at play. In a matter of moments, the shark reappeared, its dorsal fin slicing through the water as it made a beeline for the intake pipes. Jalen gunned the engine, steering the boat directly into its path. Zara threw the first net, missing as the shark dove below, narrowly avoiding their trap. Malia's voice crackled over the radio, warning them that the shark was about to make contact with the facility's systems. Suddenly, the boat lurched as the shark rammed into it from below. The impact nearly knocked Zara overboard, but she held firm, her heart pounding in her chest. Jalen quickly regained control, swerving to avoid another strike. The shark, enraged and relentless, came at them again, this time striking the boat hard enough to crack the hull. In a final, desperate move, Zara managed to throw a second net, this time landing it squarely over the shark's head. Jalen, with quick reflexes, fired the tranquilizer dart, hitting the creature just behind its dorsal fin. The shark thrashed violently, but the tranquilizer began to take effect, slowing its movements until it finally sank beneath the surface, subdued. With the immediate threat contained, the team knew they had only bought themselves time. The shark's erratic behavior was a symptom of something much larger, an environmental crisis brewing in the waters of Northern California. As they pulled the shark's massive form onto the dock, battered but alive, the weight of their discovery hung heavy in the cold, foggy air. This was only the beginning. In the heart of the Amazon River basin, the indigenous people lived in harmony with the water, attuned to its rhythms and gifts. But recently, the once predictable river had shifted, taking on a darker, more threatening character, unsettling the delicate balance of life. Raul, a seasoned fisherman, felt it first. His hands, worn from years of casting nets, noticed the peculiar patterns in the fish stocks. Every morning he would rise before the sun to glide his modest canoe through the glassy water, casting his nets with skill passed down through generations. But the fish weren't behaving as they should. They were scarce, agitated, and often disappeared entirely from sections of the river that were once teeming with life. His nets returned light, holding only a few stray catches. He knew something wasn't right. Other fishermen began whispering about strange occurrences on the water. Boats were tipping over mysteriously, and nets were being shredded beyond repair, often returning to the surface as nothing but tangled ruins. At first, the community believed it to be the work of caimans or anacondas, both dangerous but familiar predators. But then the sightings started, shadows beneath the surface moving faster than anything that should have belonged in these waters. Raul, with a mix of dread and curiosity, set out with his nephew to investigate one early morning. The river mist hung thick and heavy in the air, curling around them as their canoe cut a slow path through the water. Every sound, the splash of an oar, the distant cries of birds, the hum of insects, seemed amplified in the stillness. As they neared a bend in the river, something hit the side of the canoe with such force that Raul was nearly thrown overboard. The boat rocked violently as his nephew frantically tried to regain balance. Whatever had struck them was massive. Heart-pounding, Raul scanned the water, and there it was. A dorsal fin cutting through the river, slicing the surface in a way that didn't belong. A bull shark. Its sleek, muscular body glided through the brown water with terrifying ease, the triangular fin betraying the menace beneath. Raul had heard stories of bull sharks, how they could survive in both saltwater and freshwater, and how their aggressive nature made them fearsome predators. But the Amazon River basin had never been home to sharks. This was unprecedented. The shark circled the canoe, and Raul could see its pale underbelly flashing as it moved beneath them. It was large, easily 8 or 9 feet long, a predator out of place in this ecosystem. A violent splash to the right caught their attention. The shark had rammed into a floating log, testing its strength, pushing the boundary between curiosity and aggression. The fishermen quickly turned back, their hearts racing, leaving behind the bend where the shark continued its patrol. But the encounter was only the beginning. Over the next few days, more sightings occurred. Boats were attacked, and fishermen found themselves thrown into the water as the bull shark's erratic behavior escalated. It began attacking nets with precision, tearing them apart with its powerful jaws. Livelihoods were at stake. This was no longer just a strange predator, it was a threat. The community elders convened with Raoul and other fishermen. The shark's presence was a mystery, but the reasons became clear when they spoke to environmentalists studying the river. Deforestation and pollution upstream have disrupted the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Fish populations had dwindled, and the once clear tributaries had turned murky with silt and chemicals. The bull sharks, usually content in distant waters, had been forced into human-inhabited parts of the river, pushed more profoundly by the destruction of their natural habitats. As the situation worsened, the community faced an existential dilemma: how to protect themselves from a creature that was only there because of human interference. The fishermen had spent generations coexisting with the river's wildlife, but this was different. The bull shark's aggression wasn't a natural part of the ecosystem. It was an invader, a displaced predator caught in the same environmental turmoil as the people themselves. The solution wasn't as simple as removing the shark. Environmentalists warned that more could follow, and without addressing the root causes, the river would continue to push its inhabitants, human and animal alike, into conflict. The fishermen, while understanding the broader issues, needed to act quickly. Raoul and the others began reinforcing their boats, crafting barriers for their nets, and learning to fish in safer, shallower areas. But the river was unpredictable, and the shark's attacks became bolder, more direct. One evening, Raoul set out with two others to place new nets farther upstream. The air was thick with humidity, and the water was still, reflecting the deep greens of the jungle like a mirror. They worked quietly, muscles straining as they cast the heavy nets. But the calm was shattered when a powerful force hit the side of the boat. The fishermen stumbled, grabbing the edges to steady themselves, but the water began to swirl in a frenzy. The bull shark surfaced, thrashing violently as it attacked the nets with brute force. The boat rocked wildly, tipping dangerously close to the water's surface. Raoul's heart raced as he grabbed for the oars, trying to maneuver the ship away. But the shark was relentless. Its body crashed against the hull, knocking one of the men, Harry, into the water. Chaos erupted as he struggled to stay afloat, his hands splashing desperately as the shark circled beneath. Raoul and the other fishermen frantically paddled, trying to reach their companion before the shark made its move. In the swirling water, Raoul saw the shark's fin cut through the surface, heading straight for Harry. It was too fast, too powerful. The shark's body twisted as it struck, pulling Harry under with horrifying speed. The water churned red, and Raoul's stomach twisted with helplessness as he saw the river claim another victim. The survivors managed to pull the boat to shore, shaken and bloodied, their friend lost to the depths. The bull shark had proven itself a more formidable enemy than any they had faced before. In the aftermath, the community mourned the loss but knew that the fight for the river wasn't over. Environmentalists worked closely with the fishermen, advocating for more robust protection of the river's ecosystem to prevent further invasions of displaced predators. The bull shark had been a symptom of a larger crisis, one that threatened not just the people's livelihoods, but the very balance of life in the Amazon. The fishermen, bound by centuries of tradition, adapted as they were determined to protect their way of life. The coastal resort in South Africa was a gleaming paradise, attracting travelers from around the globe. Stretching for miles, its pristine white beaches melted into turquoise waters that shimmered beneath the warm midday sun. Guests lounged lazily on the sand, sipping cocktails, while others explored the vibrant coral reefs just offshore, home to a breathtaking array of marine life. For snorkelers and divers, it was a dream destination, with colorful fish and exotic sea creatures just a few strokes away. Among marine life, the zebra shark was one of the resort's main attractions. Slow-moving and distinguished by its unique stripes, it was generally regarded as harmless and known for its peaceful demeanor. Though primarily nocturnal, these sharks could occasionally be spotted during the day, gliding gracefully through the water. For years, tourists were captivated by the sight of them, never once viewing the zebra shark as a threat. But recently, whispers had begun to circulate among the resort guests. Swimmers shared stories of unnerving encounters with the usually gentle sharks, strange brushes against their legs, or divers witnessing them dart erratically in the water. The behavior was odd and unexplained, but initially dismissed as overblown tales from anxious tourists. After all, zebra sharks had never been known to attack humans. That changed with a serious incident. Ethan Drummond, an experienced snorkeler, had ventured just beyond the shallow reefs, mesmerized by the vivid coral and schools of fish. Below him, a zebra shark swam languidly along the ocean floor, a familiar and calming sight. As he floated above, admiring its graceful movements, the shark's behavior shifted abruptly. Without warning, it shot upward with startling speed, colliding violently with Ethan. Startled, he thrashed in the water, trying to regain his bearings. The shark, seemingly provoked by his movement, circled back and bumped him again, this time with force. By the time Ethan scrambled back to shore, his leg was bleeding, scraped by the shark's rough skin. Though shaken, he was thankful the injuries weren't more severe. The incident sent shockwaves through the resort. In response, management immediately increased security around the popular swimming areas and advised guests to exercise caution when entering the water. However, the question loomed: what had caused this sudden change in the shark's behavior? Determined to get answers, the resort hired a team of marine biologists to investigate. Leading the team was Dr. Helena Visser, a highly regarded marine conservationist with extensive experience studying shark behavior. As the team dived into their research, they uncovered alarming findings. Overfishing in the region has escalated in recent months, creating a ripple effect throughout the local ecosystem. The zebra shark's primary food sources, small fish and crustaceans, were becoming increasingly scarce. Desperate for sustenance, the sharks had been drawn closer to the resort's busy shores, where human activity was at its peak. With their natural feeding patterns disrupted, the typically docile zebra sharks were growing more aggressive as they competed for limited resources. Dr. Visser presented her findings to the resort management, revealing an uncomfortable truth. The resort's business practices were contributing to the ecosystem's collapse. The demand for high-end seafood dishes, widespread among the resort's guests, had fueled overfishing, tipping the balance of the delicate marine environment. The very creatures that attracted visitors were now at risk, and the sharks were merely a symptom of a larger problem. Tensions mounted. The resort was an economic powerhouse, providing jobs and boosting the local economy. But now its practices were under scrutiny. The management faced a difficult decision: maintain the status quo and continue catering to tourist demands, or shift towards more sustainable practices that would preserve the environment and the resort's long-term success. Meanwhile, incidents continued. One afternoon, deep in the reef, Marcus Lennox, an experienced diver, found himself in a precarious situation. He had ventured into the depths, eager to capture footage of the coral formations, when he sensed movement nearby. Glancing to his left, Marcus saw several zebra sharks circling with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. He froze, knowing that sudden movements could provoke an attack. The sharks' behavior was erratic, their usual calm replaced by something far more menacing. Just as Marcus tried to back away slowly, one of the sharks brushed against him with enough force to knock him off balance. Panicked, he floundered in the water, struggling to steady himself. The sharks continued to circle, their movements unpredictable and unnerving. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus managed to retreat to the safety of his dive boat. His heart pounded, and though he was physically unharmed, the encounter left him deeply shaken. As these close calls mounted, the resort had no choice but to close certain swimming areas temporarily, disappointing many of its guests. Some were vocal about their frustration, but others began to ask more profound questions about the resort's impact on the local environment. Under Dr. Visser's guidance, conversations about sustainable practices began to gain traction. The zebra sharks weren't the villains here. They were adapting to survive in a rapidly changing environment. The resort's management was caught in a difficult bind. The business had thrived on the allure of its marine life and pristine beaches. Still, it now faced the reality that its practices were contributing to the degradation of the very ecosystem it depended on. Would the resort take the necessary steps to protect the environment, even if it meant short-term financial losses? Or would it continue to prioritize profit over sustainability? As the zebra shark's behavior grew more erratic, guests who once flocked to the water's edge now stayed firmly on land. The sharks had become symbols of a more significant battle between human activity and nature, a warning of what could happen when an ecosystem is pushed to its limits. Dr. Visser and her team continued to advocate for more robust conservation measures, warning that the situation could worsen if immediate action weren't taken. In the end, the incident served as a harsh reminder of the delicate balance between human development and nature.